When my mom slammed her wine glass down at Christmas dinner, the entire room went silent. In front of 30 relatives, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "You will pay for your sister's $93,000 wedding, or you are dead to this family." I looked around the room, waiting for someone to defend me, but my dad stood up, adjusted his collar, and coldly added, "Every person at this table agrees, Claire. You owe her this." They thought the public humiliation would break me. They thought I would roll over and hand over my life savings just to keep the peace. Instead, I stood up, left my keys on the table, and walked out into the freezing night. That was 6 months ago. Today, my phone has logged exactly 122 missed calls and 54 sobbing voicemails. But they aren't calling to apologize. They're calling because they finally realized what my departure actually cost them. My name is Claire Bennett, and at 27 years old, I finally learned that the people who share your DNA can sometimes be the most dangerous people in your life. I am a self-made accountant, a profession built on cold, hard facts, balance sheets, and numbers that never lie. Unfortunately, my family prefers fiction. Specifically, the fiction that my younger sister Chloe is a flawless princess who deserves the world, while I am merely the background character meant to fund her fairy tale. Growing up, the dynamic was always crystal clear. Chloe was the golden child, and I was the invisible black sheep. When she wanted dance lessons, designer clothes, or a new car for her 16th birthday, my parents happily emptied their pockets. But when it came to my future, the vault was locked. I paid every cent of my own college tuition by working double shifts at a local diner, surviving on caffeine and sheer determination while maintaining a perfect grade point average. Through years of relentless grit, I built a highly successful career and finally bought my own beautiful apartment. I thought my independence would shield me from their entitlement, but greed has a funny way of rewriting boundaries. Before we get to the exact moment their trap snapped shut at Christmas dinner, take a second to comment below with the city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Little did I know, my success hadn't earned my family's respect. It had only painted a massive target on my back. The air in my parents' dining room was thick with the scent of roasted pine and expensive vanilla, a suffocating backdrop to the ambush they had spent weeks planning. Looking back at that night, I can still see exactly how confident they felt. It was Christmas dinner, and 30 of our closest relatives were crammed around a mahogany table, clinking glasses and passing silver platters. I thought I was just attending a holiday dinner. Then, Chloe cleared her throat. A sickeningly sweet smile plastered across her face. She announced she was finally getting married, but it wasn't just any wedding. She pulled out a detailed binder outlining a 3-day, $93,000 destination extravaganza. Before I could even process the absurdity of that number, my mom slammed her wine glass down, shattering the festive chatter. She looked me dead in the eye and delivered the ultimatum that fractured our family forever. "Claire, you are successful, and you are single. You will pay for your sister's $93,000 dream wedding, or you are dead to this family." The entire room froze. I waited for someone, anyone, to call out the sheer madness of demanding my life savings. Instead, my dad stood up, adjusted his collar with chilling laziness, and looked down his nose at me. "Every person at this table agrees, Claire," he said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "You owe her this." 30 pairs of eyes stared back at me, blinking with cold, synchronized entitlement. I didn't scream, and I didn't cry. The sheer weight of their collective betrayal washed over me, leaving behind a cold, absolute clarity. I slowly folded my linen napkin, set it neatly beside my untouched plate, and stood up. Without saying a single word to the 30 people watching me, I grabbed my coat, left my house keys on the table, and walked out into the freezing winter night. As the heavy oak front door clicked shut behind me, the suffocating atmosphere of my childhood home vanished, replaced by the crisp, clean air of freedom. That very night, I chose to cut the toxic cords completely. I arrived at my apartment, sat on my couch, and systematically blocked every single family member on social media. I changed my phone settings to filter out unknown numbers and altered my daily routines, ensuring I wouldn't run into them at my usual spots. For the first time in 27 years, I breathed easily, fully prepared to build a fresh life in my peaceful sanctuary, entirely free from their crushing expectations. I spent the next few months focusing on my accounting firm, pouring my energy into my clients, and decorating my space exactly how I wanted. It was a beautiful, hard-earned peace, and I genuinely believed the nightmare was over. But deep down, a small part of me knew that my family's sudden silence wouldn't last forever. Greed doesn't just slip away into the night, it sits in the dark, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. Exactly 6 months after I walked out of that Christmas dinner, the fragile peace I had built was instantly shattered. It was a crisp Tuesday morning when I picked up my phone and felt my heart drop into my stomach. The screen was completely flooded with an avalanche of urgent, glowing notifications. In less than 24 hours, my phone had logged exactly 122 missed calls. Along with them was a staggering list of 54 voicemails, each one pushing the storage capacity of my inbox to its absolute limit. The silence that had felt like a protective shield for half a year had violently broken, and the sheer volume of notifications made my hands shake. With a racing pulse, I sat at my kitchen counter and began playing the messages. The first few were from my mother, her voice high-pitched and completely hysterical, alternating between furious, defensive screaming and breathless, dramatic sobbing. She kept screeching about how cold-hearted I was, demanding that I answer immediately. Next came my father's messages, which lacked his usual calm, commanding authority. Instead, his voice sounded strained, deep, and deeply unhinged as he practically ordered me to pick up the phone. Even Chloe had left several tear-stained, desperate rants, begging me to stop ruining her life. It was a chaotic symphony of panic and rage. I sat there in total bewilderment, trying to comprehend what could have possibly triggered this sudden, desperate onslaught after months of treating me like I was dead to them. They weren't just angry anymore. They were absolutely terrified, and I was about to find out exactly why. To uncover the truth behind the madness, I clicked on a 7-minute voicemail from my father. His voice was completely stripped of its usual arrogance, replaced by a raw, trembling desperation that made me lean in closer. As I listened, the final pieces of their sick puzzle fell into place, and the massive plot twist unraveled. My parents hadn't just demanded I pay for Chloe's $93,000 wedding out of a twisted sense of sibling fairness. They had actually gone behind my back months ago and co-signed every single luxury venue, catering, and vendor contract directly in Chloe's name. They had fully, arrogantly assumed that their public humiliation tactic at Christmas dinner would break me, forcing me to roll over and hand over my life savings to cover the bills. They never envisioned a scenario where I would actually walk away and stay gone. Now, 6 months later, the critical payment deadlines had arrived, and the vendors were aggressively demanding their massive, non-refundable deposits. Because I wasn't there to bankroll her delusion, the entire extravagant wedding was on the absolute verge of being canceled. But it got worse for them. Because my parents had legally co-signed those binding contracts, they weren't just facing social embarrassment, they were facing massive personal lawsuits for breach of contract. They were staring down the barrel of total financial ruin, credit destruction, and bankruptcy. The 122 calls weren't an apology. They were a frantic, coordinated attempt to drag me back into the burning house they had built themselves. They had swallowed their pride because they desperately needed my financial rescue, but their arrogance had officially trapped them in a nightmare of their own making. Realizing that the harassment would never stop until I put an end to it myself, I agreed to meet my mother one last time at a quiet, public coffee shop downtown. When I walked in, I barely recognized the woman sitting in the corner booth. The manicured, flawlessly maintained facade she usually wore was completely gone. She looked exhausted, disheveled, and deeply shaken, her hands trembling as she clutched a lukewarm mug of coffee. The moment I sat down across from her, she didn't yell or demand. Instead, she begged. She wept openly, pleading with me to save the family from the impending lawsuits, sobbing that Chloe's life would be permanently ruined if the wedding was canceled. But the moment I refused to hand over my hard-earned savings, her desperate tears vanished, instantly replaced by her familiar venomous rage. She slammed her hand on the table and hissed that I was an ungrateful, selfish monster who owed everything to the family that raised her. I didn't flinch. I simply opened my briefcase, pulled out a thick stack of official legal documents, and slid them across the table. It was a formal cease and desist order, backed by evidence of their harassment and a strict warning that any further contact would result in immediate legal action. My mother stared at the papers, her jaw dropping as she realized she had absolutely no leverage left. I leaned in, looked her dead in the eyes, and repeated my father's exact words from Christmas dinner back to her. "You told me I was dead to this family. Well, dead people don't write checks." The legal documents did exactly what they were meant to do, instantly silencing the avalanche of calls and voicemails. With no financial savior coming to rescue them from their own greed, reality hit my family like a physical blow. Chloe's $93,000 destination extravaganza was abruptly canceled, replaced by a tense, incredibly cheap afternoon ceremony at the local courthouse with no reception. To pay off the massive breach of contract penalties and avoid total bankruptcy, my parents were forced to downsize, selling their beloved mahogany table and moving into a cramped, two-bedroom apartment. Meanwhile, my life has completely flourished. My accounting firm is thriving, and my peaceful sanctuary remains completely free from their toxic emotional manipulation and crushing financial abuse. Walking away from my own flesh and blood was the hardest thing I have ever had to do. But it touched me and taught me that family isn't about sharing a bloodline. It's about respect, boundaries, and love that doesn't come with a $93,000 price tag. If your own flesh and blood backed you into a corner like this, would you have walked away, or would you have paid to keep the peace? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.